Winter was always my favorite time of the year. The crisp air, the glow of holiday lights reflecting off the fresh snow, and most importantly, the tradition. Every year, without fail, I built a snowman. But not just any snowman. This wasn't some hastily thrown together pile of snow with a carrot nose and two uneven stick arms. No, my snowmen were art. One year, I sculpted a snow wizard, complete with an ice staff. Another year, I built a snow Viking, helmet and all. Kids from all over the neighborhood would come by to take pictures. Parents would smile and compliment my work. For a few weeks, it became a small centerpiece of our little community, something that brought people together, even if just to admire a chunk of frozen water molded into a familiar shape. But this year would be different. Because this was the year Karen decided she hated my snowman. Now, if you've never had the misfortune of dealing with a Karen before, let me explain. There are annoying neighbors, there are difficult neighbors, and then there are HOA Karens, the ones who thrive on unnecessary rules, who get a thrill out of bossing people around and making up authority where they have none. They'll tell you your trash bins aren't the right color, that your lawn isn't regulation height, that your car is parked at a non-aesthetic angle. They live for nonsense. Karen was the queen of nonsense. For the past year, she had terrorized the neighborhood with fake fines, noise complaints about birds chirping, and letters demanding people repaint their fences a specific shade of beige. She didn't actually have any power, of course. Our neighborhood had voted against having an HOA years ago. But that didn't stop Karen. Oh no. She had taken it upon herself to invent one. A fake HOA, complete with printed violation notices, fake rules, and even a fake email address to send complaints. Nobody took her seriously. Well, almost nobody. Some of the newer residents, the ones who weren't around when the HOA was actually voted down, had no idea she was a fraud. They just assumed she had authority because she acted like she did. And Karen, she loved that. But up until now, she had mostly been an annoying background presence, something you rolled your eyes at and ignored. I never thought she'd actually make me a target. And then, one morning, I stepped outside and found my snowman completely obliterated. Not knocked over by the wind, not melted by the sun. Destroyed. Its head was missing. The arms were snapped. The base had been stomped flat into the ground like it had been executed. At first I thought, maybe some neighborhood kids got a little too rough. Maybe an accident, a clumsy dog. Then I checked my security camera. There she was. Karen. 11:47 p.m. In her bathrobe and slippers, marching across my lawn like some kind of self-appointed enforcer. She paused in front of my snowman, sneered, and then, wham! She kicked the head off like she was taking a penalty shot in the World Cup. But she wasn't done. She ripped off the arms. She stomped the body into oblivion. And then, for the final insult, she reached into her bathrobe pocket, pulled out a hairdryer, and started melting the remains. I had to rewind the footage twice because I honestly couldn't believe what I was seeing. Who the hell carries a hairdryer in their pocket just to melt a snowman? I stood there, staring at the screen, feeling my emotions shift from confusion to disbelief, to pure, unfiltered rage. What kind of lunatic does this? And then, as if things couldn't get worse, I noticed something stuck in my mailbox. A letter, printed on official-looking paper. Dear homeowner, as per the new HOA regulations, all unauthorized yard decorations must be removed within 24 hours. Failure to comply may result in fines. Signed, Karen, HOA President. I almost laughed. Because here's the thing, there was no HOA. Karen had no real power, no authority. She was just pretending. And now, apparently, my snowman had become the latest victim of her imaginary rulebook. Oh, hell no. I wasn't going to let this slide. That very afternoon, I rebuilt the snowman. Bigger, stronger, better. I even added extra layers of packed snow to make it harder to destroy. And this time, I positioned my security cameras perfectly. Because if Karen wanted a war, she was about to get one. That night, I stayed up late. I didn't have to wait long. At exactly 11:47 p.m., like clockwork, the queen of HOA nonsense returned. This time she was armed, with a shovel. She didn't just knock it down, she went full-on snow archaeologist. She hacked at it, dug it up from the ground, made absolutely sure there was no trace left behind. And then, the cherry on top, another letter, another fake fine. By now, I had zero doubt that this wasn't about yard regulations or some made-up HOA rule. This was personal. Karen had made me her project. And if she wanted to play games, well, I was about to win. The next morning I stood outside, staring at the wreckage of my snowman for the third time. My hands clenched into fists as I surveyed the destruction. It wasn't just annoying anymore. It wasn't just an inconvenience. This had officially become a battle. And Karen? She had declared war. I picked up the latest fake violation notice she had left behind, scanning the ridiculous words. Unauthorized yard obstructions must be removed. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines and potential legal action. Escalating fines? Legal action? For a snowman? I crumpled the paper in my hand and took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Losing my temper wouldn't help. I needed to think. I needed a strategy. Karen had upped the ante. She wasn't just pushing the snowman over anymore. She was making sure it didn't come back. She had used a shovel this time. A shovel, like she was digging up evidence of a crime. She wanted me to give up. She wanted me to bend to her imaginary authority. That was never going to happen. So, if Karen wanted to play dirty, I was going to show her exactly how bad of an idea that was. I spent the next hour at my desk, researching. I looked up fraudulent HOA claims. I dug into the laws about impersonating a legal entity. I even found multiple reports from other neighborhoods where fake HOAs had scammed homeowners out of thousands of dollars. And then it hit me. Karen's entire scam relied on people believing she had power. But if I exposed her, if I proved to the neighborhood that she was nothing more than a bored, middle-aged woman playing pretend, her reign would be over. But first, I needed to rebuild my snowman. And this time, it was going to be Karen-proof. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the hardware store. If Karen thought she could keep knocking down my snowman, she was in for the shock of her life. I walked down the aisles, grabbing exactly what I needed. A steel drum, something solid, something that wouldn't budge if she tried to push it over. Quick-set cement. If she wanted a fight, I was going to give her a brick wall, a metal pole, something to anchor the entire thing into the ground. As I loaded up my cart, I caught a few confused stares from the store employees. They must have thought I was preparing for a very weird construction project. If only they knew. I got home and wasted no time. The first step was simple. I filled the steel drum with water and cement, letting it set into a rock-solid core. That alone would have been enough to stop Karen, but I wasn't done. Next, I buried a metal pole deep into the ground, securing it in place before setting the drum on top of it. Now, even if she somehow managed to tip it over, it wouldn't go anywhere. Then came the illusion. I carefully packed snow around the drum, sculpting it into a perfectly normal-looking snowman. It had the round shape, the friendly little stick arms, the classic carrot nose. To anyone passing by, it looked innocent, just another festive decoration. But beneath that fluffy exterior, it was an unstoppable fortress. For the final touch, I sprayed the outer layer with water, letting it freeze into an invisible ice shell. If Karen even tried to touch it, she'd regret it instantly. But I knew Karen. I knew her tactics. And if she really wanted to be vindictive, she'd escalate again. She'd get desperate. And desperate people? They do stupid things. So I left one last surprise. Inside the base of my snowman, carefully placed where no one would see, I hid a few bricks. Not enough to be obvious. Just enough to make sure that if Karen tried to ram it with her SUV, she was in for one hell of a surprise. By the time I was done, I took a step back and admired my work. From the street, it looked harmless. But underneath, it was a trap. And now, all I had to do was wait. It didn't take long. Right on schedule, just as the sun set, I heard the low hum of an engine creeping down the street. Karen's SUV. She slowed down as she approached my house, her headlights illuminating the snowman. I could see her reaction. The way her foot tapped the brake. The way she just sat there, staring at it. She was seething. She had spent days trying to destroy this thing. And now, here it was, bigger and better than ever. She wasn't going to let this slide. Karen pulled into my driveway. I knew what was coming. I watched as she stormed out of her car, gripping a brand new shovel. She stomped through my yard, rage practically radiating off her. She raised the shovel and swung, clang. The moment metal met steel, she let out a sharp yelp, stumbling back as the impact rattled through her arms. She hadn't expected that. Karen stood there, glaring at the snowman, shaking her hands. She stepped closer, inspecting it. Maybe she noticed the solid resistance. Maybe she saw that something wasn't right. But instead of giving up, she made a phone call. I already knew what was coming. A few minutes later, I heard the engine rev. She got back into her SUV. She was positioning herself. I almost couldn't believe it. She was going to ram it. I held my breath as her brake lights flickered. Then, she slammed her foot on the gas. Crunch. The instant impact was glorious. Her front bumper folded like a cheap tin can. The hood crumpled inward. The sound of metal crushing against cement echoed down the street. The radiator exploded in a burst of steam and smoke. And the snowman? It didn't even move. I watched from my window, holding back laughter as Karen stumbled out of her car, horror plastered across her face. Her brand new luxury SUV was wrecked. And the best part? This time, she couldn't blame anyone but herself. Karen stood there, frozen in place, her hands gripping her head as if trying to process what had just happened. Steam poured out from under the crumpled hood of her SUV. The front bumper completely caved in. The headlights flickered pathetically, as if even the car itself was in shock. And in the middle of all of this chaos, standing completely untouched, unbothered, undefeated, my snowman. I stepped outside, taking a slow sip of my hot chocolate, savoring the moment. The winter air was crisp, the stars twinkling above, and the sound of Karen's very expensive mistake still echoed in the night. She finally spun around to face me, her face red with fury and embarrassment. You booby-trapped your property, she shrieked, pointing at the snowman like it had personally insulted her. I blinked at her, fighting back a smirk. Karen, it's just a snowman. Her eyes practically bulged out of her skull. That is not just a snowman, she screeched. You put something inside it. This is illegal. I took another slow sip of my drink. Karen, you just rammed your own car into a pile of snow. I gestured toward the wreckage of her SUV. I don't think I'm the one who broke any laws tonight. Her jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might shatter. She looked between me, my snowman, and her totaled vehicle, searching for a way to spin this into her being the victim. But there was no way out. She had just crashed her own car into my yard, trying to destroy a completely legal decoration. And then, just when I thought this night couldn't get any better, the police arrived. A flicker of blue and red lights bounced off the snow, and I could already hear the sigh of absolute exhaustion from Officer Mitchell as he stepped out of his squad car. This wasn't his first time dealing with Karen. Probably wouldn't be his last. "What the hell happened now?" he muttered, rubbing his temples like he already regretted asking. Karen immediately switched gears. "Oh, thank God you're here, officer," she gasped, clutching her chest like she had just survived a life-threatening attack. "I was just driving when I was viciously attacked." She spun around, dramatically pointing at my snowman. That thing is a trap. He tried to kill me." Mitchell stared at her, then at the perfectly still snowman, then at her destroyed SUV. He exhaled. "Ma'am, did you just hit a snowman with your car?" Karen's face twitched. It's not just a snowman. He put cement inside it. That's illegal." Mitchell turned to me, his face unreadable. "Sir?" I nodded solemnly. "It's just a snowman, officer." Mitchell sighed deeply, looking like he was reconsidering all of his life choices that had led him to this moment. He took a step closer to Karen's SUV, his flashlight scanning the wreckage. "Ma'am, you do realize you just drove onto his private property, right?" Karen stiffened. "That's not the point," she snapped. "He set me up." Mitchell rubbed the bridge of his nose. "You drove your vehicle into a snowman. That's what I'm hearing." Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "Yes, but—" "And you deliberately pulled into his driveway, onto his property, and rammed an inanimate object." "Well, Mitchell turned to his partner, Officer Daniels, who had just walked up and was clearly struggling not to laugh. "Daniels, I need you to write up a reckless driving citation and a destruction of property report." Karen screeched. "Destruction of property? It was a snowman." Mitchell gave her a look. "Ma'am, you intentionally destroyed someone's property with your car. The fact that the property in question is made of snow doesn't change the fact that you trespassed and caused damage." Karen was fuming. "You can't do this. I'm the victim." Daniels handed her a clipboard with the ticket. "You're also financially responsible for your own damages, since this was private property. Your insurance isn't going to cover this." Karen turned so red I thought she might actually implode. "This is harassment. I'm gonna sue." Daniels didn't even blink. "You go right ahead, ma'am. I'd love to see that case." At this point, I was struggling not to laugh. But then, the final nail in Karen's coffin. Mitchell flipped open a second folder. "We've also received multiple complaints from neighbors about fraudulent HOA fines and illegal fee collections. The city is opening an investigation into your activities." Karen went silent. Dead silent. Her hands trembled as she took the clipboard, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. This was her worst nightmare. Not only had she been publicly humiliated, not only had she destroyed her own car in an act of sheer pettiness, but now she was under official investigation. I let out a slow breath, watching the full weight of the situation crash down on her. Mitchell gave me a nod. "Sir, would you like to press charges for trespassing and property damage?" I considered it, and then I smiled. "You know what, officer? I think Karen's got enough legal trouble for one night. I'll settle for a formal trespassing warning." Mitchell nodded. "Fair enough." He turned to Karen. "Ma'am, you are officially trespassed from this property. If you step foot on this lawn again, you will be arrested." Karen looked like she was going to explode. Her SUV was totaled. Her fake HOA scam was exposed. And worst of all, the snowman was still standing. As the officers walked away, I turned back to Karen, my mug of hot chocolate still warm in my hands. "Oh, And Karen? She snapped her head up, seething. I grinned. See you next winter. Her frustrated scream echoed into the cold night. The neighborhood was buzzing the next morning. By sunrise, everyone had heard about what happened. The wrecked SUV, the cops, the official fraud investigation into Karen's fake HOA. It spread like wildfire. The best part? I didn't even have to tell anyone. People had seen it with their own eyes. They had heard the crash, seen Karen screaming at the police, and most importantly, they saw the Snowman still standing, completely unharmed. The entire street was talking. But while we were all having a great time reliving the moment, Karen, she was not handling it well. For the first time ever, she was silent. No ridiculous complaint letters. No HOA threats. No Karen patrols walking around the block like she was inspecting her kingdom. Her house, which used to be ground zero for her fake HOA operation, was now eerily quiet. And then, right when I thought maybe, just maybe, she was finally going to disappear in shame, Karen did the most Karen thing possible. Less than 24 hours after she totaled her own SUV against my Snowman, I woke up to a new letter taped to my front door. At first I thought it was another fake violation notice, but when I opened it, I nearly died laughing. It was a bill, an actual printed invoice demanding payment from the entire neighborhood. Dear homeowners, due to recent unforeseen circumstances, all residents are required to pay a one-time community reimbursement fee of $300 to cover damages sustained by the HOA president's vehicle due to a neighborhood safety hazard. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines. I had to sit down. She wasn't just doubling down. She was trying to make the entire neighborhood pay for the car she destroyed on my Snowman. It was the single most unhinged thing I had ever seen. At the bottom of the letter, in bold red text, was a deadline. Payments must be made in cash or check within 7 days. Please deliver to the HOA office, Karen's house, immediately. I nearly dropped my coffee. She was actually trying to scam the neighborhood into paying for her SUV repairs. The level of audacity was impressive. I needed to show someone. So I grabbed the letter and walked down to my neighbor Mike's house. Mike had lived here even longer than I had, a retired army vet who took no nonsense from anyone. When I handed him the letter, he read it once, then twice. Then he just shook his head. She really thinks people are going to pay this? He asked, eyes wide. Oh, she's not just thinking it, I grinned. She's expecting it. Mike let out a low whistle. This woman's got a bigger ego than my drill sergeant. I nodded. So, what do we do? Mike thought for a moment, then his face split into a grin. We let her dig her own grave. And that's exactly what we did. Instead of immediately calling her out, we let the letter spread. We let word get around. We waited to see how far she'd take it. Karen, convinced she was still the queen of the neighborhood, went door to door that afternoon, reminding people about their mandatory payments. That was the moment we struck. Mike and I gathered as many neighbors as possible and marched straight to Karen's house. She opened the door, smug as ever, until she saw how many of us were standing there. Her face dropped. Mike held up his copy of the letter. So, Karen, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, I just wanted to clarify something. Karen forced a smile. Oh, of course. The payments are due by next week. Right, Mike interrupted. But I was just wondering, which legal authority are you using to collect this money? Karen blinked. Excuse me? Mike tilted his head. Well, you're demanding money from the entire community. That means there's got to be some kind of legal backing, right? I mean, this isn't fraud, is it? Karen flinched. Oh, of course not. This is an HOA matter. That's when Susan, another neighbor, stepped forward. Oh, actually, she said sweetly, holding up her phone. I already checked with the city this morning. Karen's eyes snapped to her. And guess what? Susan continued. There is no HOA. The crowd murmured. In fact, she said, grinning, the city says they've already received multiple complaints about you sending fake violation notices. Karen's face went bone white. And that's when the first person ripped up their letter. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire crowd started shredding her fake invoices right in front of her. Karen looked like she was going to implode. You can't just... Oh, but we can, Mike cut in cheerfully. And hey, speaking of legal matters... Susan beamed. The city is sending someone to investigate you this week. Karen's mouth snapped shut. That was it. That was the moment she broke. She let out an inhuman screech, slammed the door in our faces, and vanished inside. Less than 2 hours later, the neighborhood Facebook group got an update. Karen had officially resigned as HOA president. Of an HOA that never even existed. But it wasn't over. Because while Karen was licking her wounds, the real legal trouble was just beginning. For the next 2 weeks, the city dug into her finances. And when the final bombshell dropped, it was glorious. It happened on a Thursday morning. A fleet of government vehicles pulled onto Karen's street. 3 city officials, 1 police car, 2 bank representatives. Karen's front door flew open. She saw them. She tried to slam the door shut. Didn't work. The lead investigator stepped forward. Ma'am, we have concluded our investigation into your activities. She flipped through a fat stack of documents. You owe tens of thousands of dollars in illegally collected fees, unpaid taxes, and legal penalties. Karen staggered. Beep! But... The investigator didn't even look up. The bank is foreclosing on your home due to non-payment of your mortgage. Karen screeched. You have 30 minutes to vacate. The neighborhood watched as her entire world collapsed. And me? I just stood there, sipping my hot chocolate. As they dragged out her furniture, as they seized her belongings, as she sobbed in the driveway. She had to walk past my snowman, still standing, unmoved, undefeated. As she disappeared down the street, Mike leaned over and smirked. You should build her a farewell snowman. I grinned. Oh, don't worry. I already have plans for next winter.